No, no, nothing on there. I went through and kind of ticked off and then there's 2 houses in there that they're looking to have torn down and demolished and whatever. But if you look at the pictures of them,
This is not a loss.
it's not a surprise. And it would be interesting to know where those are. I know. You do. Need to know where it's at. Yeah, nothing there either. It's nothing much there either. It's more of a Byland issue. All right, folks. Calling to order the regular meeting of council Monday, April 8th, 7 p.m. precisely. Looking for approval of the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Anyone here for public participation this evening? No? All right. There you go. There's nobody here. Mayor's message, then I'll step into. I just want to remind everybody here at the table and those in the audience, if you were speaking, we are now webcasting. It still is in its trial stages, so it is not running to the viewing YouTube capacity yet, but we are using it for training purposes. If you were to come to the microphone, you have the choice of giving your name and address, or you can provide that to the recorder separately if you were concerned with privacy issues. I'd like to make everyone aware that April is Cancer Awareness Month, so the flag is flying out in our 3-flag stand out there. And in that line, also to remember, please, the passing of John Hugendorn, one of our long-time Colwood residents, whose service will be held tomorrow at 11 at the St. John the Baptist Church. It's also National Volunteer Week, April 21 to 27, and I think that it goes without saying that the volunteers in this community, as in many others, are the backbone of a number of the entities and jobs and services that we can manage to do. So congratulations and thank you to all of our volunteers. With that, moving to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of March the 25th.
Move adoption. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Looking to receive minutes of 4.2.1, 2, and 3.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to Planning and Land Use Committee, 5.1.1, and the recommendation in regards to proposed bylaw amendments to expand chicken husbandry and beekeeping in suburban residential areas.
I guess I get that one.
You can do that one.
I get to be the substitute. So this is one that Council has seen before. At the November 26th, 2012 meeting, Council passed a resolution directing staff to prepare a summary of options to liberalise rules regarding the keeping of poultry in residential areas and commence public consultation to solicit input on the potential liberalisation of rules concerning the keeping of poultry in residential areas. Probably a number of you came along to the public open house that was held in January. There were a fair number of attendees and they were all very enthusiastically supportive of having a chicken bylaw in Colwood. So staff have been working hard on this and have prepared a series of options. So the notion is that residents would be allowed up to 4 chickens, but no roosters on any single family lots smaller than 550 metres squared, and would not be allowed to slaughter or sell eggs and meat on lots smaller than 4,000 metres squared. So as a result of discussions with some other municipalities, staff actually suggested that we expand this to not only cover chickens, but also to cover honeybee keeping in residential areas as well. And the proposal allows up to 2 beehives on properties between 550 and 800 metres square in size, and 1 beehive for every 400 metres square of lot area on properties greater than 800 metres square in size. Good discussion at committee. Somebody raised issues where the safety concerns with keeping bees, but I think committee was satisfied that that was not a major issue and hadn't been an issue in other communities. The whole proposal is very supportive of our urban agriculture initiatives in our official community plan. So it was recommended by committee, and I so move, that Council direct staff to prepare draft bylaws to amend current regulations in the Land Use Bylaw number 151 and the Animal Regulation and Impounding Bylaw number 160 to liberalise rules concerning backyard chickens and beekeeping in residential areas of Colwood, as per the approach outlined in the table that is in front of you.
Discussion? Yes, did you have? No. Okay, I just have one thing, and that was in around the construction of, I mean, beehives are of their own construction and fairly specific, so not as concerned with those. But coop construction, just wanting to ensure that, we're not allowing for sort of pieces of tin slapped together and thus called a chicken coop. If there's going to be some sort of recommendation or something, I mean, I see where it says it must be kept secure, fenced, and free of vermin, but how do we regulate the sightliness of such?
It currently, as in the amendments proposed, is not covered, the style or design criteria for chicken coops. It occurs to me that we could do a couple of things. Staff could provide a brochure which offers suggestions for coops, the construction thereof, and so on. Perhaps a little more strongly, maybe we should, in conjunction with the bylaw amendments, put forward a policy or even include in the bylaw some criteria for some minimum criteria for chicken coops.
I just think that it's better to be proactive at this stage when we're introducing than trying to retroactively chase things around. And I know, I want to say Buckerfield's up in Saanich on Borden, or Borden's Mercantile maybe it is. One of those places, they actually have brochures and sell pre-built chicken coop, rabbit hutch, off the ground, elevated, that sort of thing. So I'd be in favor of, adding the brochure or strengthening it with some policy around there for sure.
Would council prefer that we actually put a clause or two in the bylaw amendments speaking to a minimum standard?
Councillor Day?
I just would point out that we do have pretty strict rules in regarding to setbacks. So it's not going to be, some ramshackle thing put up next to someone's fence. It does have to have some pretty strong setbacks. I would think that people have different ideas of what a good-looking coop would be, and I've certainly seen some really innovative ones out on the Saanich Peninsula, some really beautiful chicken coops, actually.
Thank you. Question through you to staff. So, does our unsightly premises bylaw, would that cover kind of ugly chicken coops?
No, not as currently written. But therein we could put some provisions as well.
Okay. I know during the discussion at committee, Ian was sort of clear to say that the approach had been a little bit kind of hands-off, as much in recognition that, there's a fair amount of staff time would go into kind of policing this bylaw if we kind of got too prescriptive about how it happened. But I'm just wondering if you had any language to suggest that would kind of find that nice balance between not being too prescriptive, but allows us to kind of say they need to not look like ramshackle ramshackle tin shacks or whatever.
Through the chair, how about thou shalt not construct a chicken coop out of corrugated metal?
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Worship. My fear is that, if we start being prescriptive, then, it's really, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So all of a sudden, then we start regulating the look of children's playhouse, backyard sheds, and, that sort of thing. I think we have to kind of give, we have to give some credit to those that are going to build these chicken coops, and that they don't necessarily want to ruffle the feathers of their neighbors, so to speak. So, I'm pretty satisfied with the way staff have handled this, and if it does become a problem, then I guess we can deal with it. But again, there's that policing aspect as well, and trying to keep on top of stuff, which adds another layer for staff to deal with.
And with that, I'll call the question. Councillor Martin?
I'm still concerned about this, and I guess I'm more concerned through you to staff, just regarding issues around noise and odor, because both of those things can be subjective, and it's not necessarily about the property owner taking care of it, but it's the next door neighbor. And I have experienced both chickens at the next door neighbor up in Cobble Hill. They didn't have any roosters, but those chickens were still noisy. And the second was, like, for example, a wind chime. I had a wind chime at a house beside me that just made a racket at nighttime, and it drove me crazy, and there really wasn't anything I could do to control that. So those are kind of the concerns that I'm having. I'm not concerned about the individual homeowner. I'm concerned about the next door neighbor. And how do we address those?
Through the chair, noise and odor would be covered under the nuisance bylaw? Excessive noise and odor? Under the nuisance bylaw.
With that, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion has carried.
Just peck along.
And in that pecking,
I know.
5.2.1, Finance and Admin, St. John's Heritage Church, Emery Hall Annual Operating Surplus. Councillor Martin, are you going on this one, or Councillor Day? Councillor Day?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be very eloquent. My iPad has stopped working, so I'm unable to log in today. We have previously talked about, no, I just don't have any notes. I got a paper copy. We've previously discussed the revenue from the St. John's Heritage Church in Emery Hall, and a report was brought forward with an amount to be transferred to the reserve fund. And there is some need to have a further discussion. It was I'm quite happy with the amount that was suggested previously to go into the reserve fund, but there is still some direction that's needed, and that is in regard to the calculation criteria that's going to be used to determine what the surplus is each year, and also to give staff the actual direction to transfer the calculated accumulated surplus as at December 31st, 2011. So staff have been informed about the historical understanding between council and the members of the St. John's Heritage Church Committee. The revenue from rental of those facilities and any donations that are received are to fund costs related to the maintenance and or improvement costs of the buildings of the church and the Emery Hall, and utility charges. Any excess of these revenues over these expenses would determine the annual surplus, and this would be transferred annually to the separate reserve fund. We carry an annual liability and property insurance on the St. John's Church and the Emery Hall, which was the historical setup when it was first organized back in, I think it was 1990. Could be. But the city is also going to be responsible for the external building maintenance and the grounds maintenance, with these services provided by the city's public works staff. The costs the city is responsible for are funded through the annual property tax levy. And prior to adoption of bylaw number 1495, no formal direction had been provided to staff with respect to the treatment of the annual operating surplus. And so any surplus or deficit was included in the city's general operating fund balance at year end. So as per the minutes of the March 28th, 2012 St. John's Heritage Committee meeting, the expected surplus at December 31st, 2011 is $24,320.82, and staff have substantiated this amount given the parameters identified above. The surplus for 2012 will be determined subsequent to the year-end audit so that we're working with accurate figures. And the recommendation, and I would so move, is that we direct staff to, on the calculation criteria to be used in determining the accumulated surplus, and direct staff to transfer the calculated accumulated surplus of $24,322.92 as at December 31st, 2011 to the newly created reserve fund via Bylaw 1495 for St. John's Heritage Church.
Seconder?
Second for discussion for the time being.
Yes. You want to go after the...
I'm just checking with Councillor Day because I'm just wondering if you're reading from the report that went to committee and we're looking at the report that came out of it, which has a couple of critical differences. One in that the amount that you talked about seems to be different, and the recommendation that I'm looking at in front of me says that
No, that's,
am I looking at the wrong thing?
yeah, you
Yeah.
need to go further.
Okay.
I'm reading from the report to council from the Director of Finance, and it was on page 45 of
Okay.
50.
My apologies. Looking at the wrong document.
Okay. Anyone else?
I just want some clarity. The first part of that, you asked for a calculation. What do you want us to do with that? Bring it back in a report, or how do you want staff to handle that calculation to the Heritage or St. John Committee? Just
I think the St. John Committee would be in the best position to substantiate the figures based on the revenue that's come into the church through the, I think a very simple balance sheet could be created from the bookings that would show what the revenue of the church is, which is basically all of the income from the weddings and funerals and church services and so on that take place there. And then subtracted from that would be any supplies that are ordered for there, the utilities that are charged for the oil, electricity, etc.
Rebecca.
so. I think the motion right now is just asking staff to determine a calculation each year. But what do we do with that calculation? Does the motion not need to direct staff to go to St. John Committee or come back to Finance or Council?
Today, what are you wanting from the purpose of this so that it...
I think that the best way is for it to come back to St. John's, because they need to be aware of how much money is in the reserve funds, and they need to feel that their volunteer efforts are bearing fruit, and that they're aware of how those monies are calculated. So that's an important step, that it comes back to the St. John's Church Management Committee. And then I think the verified calculation should then come back to council.
Sorry. The calculation of the balance in the reserve will be included as part of the year-end financial audit, which will, when the statements are presented to council, come to council. So do you want a separate meeting for that particular item, or can it just be as part of the year-end financial statement?
It can be part of the year-end financial statement. I just think it needs to be presented to the volunteers who generate the income, so that they know what their volunteer efforts have brought to the city.
I'm wondering, Rebecca, if perhaps a quarterly report on the balance of that account presented to the committee might work for them?
There's not a lot of money involved, but if council directs staff to prepare something like this, we can definitely try to do it, for sure.
Councillor Day?
Just a suggestion, maybe because it isn't a lot of money, maybe a half-year report, update would be better, make less work for finance and still keep the committee informed, rather than a quarterly report.
You're part of the committee. I'm looking for some help for these folks in finance. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I'm confused again. Who is monitoring, who is taking care of the day-to-day money? So when the money comes in from, say, a rental, is the money coming into a specific person and going to finance? Or where's the money going?
Marcy?
But is there a specific person designated? Should we not have a person?
Can't
since
do
it's
that.
cash?
No, it just comes to the front counter and they...
No, sorry, I'm not meaning that. Sorry, I'm meaning more from a budgetary standpoint, like who's ultimately taking care of that budget and having the income versus expenditures? Is that you?
When the receipts are brought into City Hall, they're recorded against the specific rental or use of the church or the hall. So we have fairly clear documentation that tell us what the revenue were for the hall or the church. The expenditures, there's only about 5 or 6 general ledger accounts, and when these invoices come in for the hall or the church, then we able to record them against that. At fiscal year end, we do our audit, and so there's no one specific person in finance that look after that small component of the budget. It's very small. Did I answer your question?
Oh yeah, you answered it.
Anything further? Councillor Day?
I just think the most important part is to be clear on what's to be paid from the revenue from the church and what's to be paid via taxation. So through taxation, we are maintaining the grounds and the exterior of the building. And through the revenue from the church, we are paying the utilities and the upkeep of the inside and any capital projects.
Good. Okay, with that, any other questions? Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion has been carried.
I'm just
Today?
wondering if the Director of Finance needed any further clarification from us. She had asked for to know how this was to be brought back. Are we all right with that?
I think we're clear that the calculation is as you just stated, and that a probably work with Marcy to find out when their next committee is and attend that, just so that they're also comfortable with the calculation. And then we can provide them with, similar to what we have done here. Once we finalize year-end financial statement for 2012, then we can give them an updated figure around 40,000. And I think that will make them happy.
Thank you. Moving then into 6.1, bylaw number 1505 for final reading.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Motion to move in camera. Seconder? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you, folks.